A word from the wise. Nobody's in the history books for working 60 hours a week and paying taxes. Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank. I'm that you are having a great day, and in today's video, I'd like to sit back in my very squeaky chair, relax, and have a little conversation with all of you guys about TCGs, markets, bubbles, and hard questions, because in today's video, I received a viewer question. Are TCGs in a bubble? And what would it popping mean for the consumer? And yeah, that is definitely a question you see online often enough, and I suppose now is as good a time as any to talk about it. Now, this is actually my second attempt at recording this video. I did one just a bit ago, and I played it back, and I realized that I spent most of that video rambling about Tulip Mania, and as entertaining as that surely must be, it was very off topic. So instead I stopped, wrote down a list of my notes, gave some of my thoughts, and we're going to try to have a bit more structure to this one. So if I sound a bit monotonous, that's why. First things first, after that little disclaimer, I believe it's important to get a definition for bubbles out of the way, because a lot of people hear the word bubble, but they don't really know what a financial bubble is. It's a very loud truck. Now, a bubble is any period where asset prices are actually way above their intrinsic value. Although I suppose how you measure that actual value will vary from asset to asset, and it's hard to determine really what the actual price of something is at any one time, especially in a free and open market like what we have in the world of TCGs and collectibles in general. There are different kinds of bubbles, but when it comes to TCGs, people tend to think that they are in what you would call a speculative equity bubble. And that is basically, it's a legitimate market where there is actual interest in the item itself, the actual asset, whatever it is, in this case, TCGs. But it's just experiencing unusually high demand, with high prices being kept up by speculation, which brings in more money, which drives up speculation and demand and prices and brings in more money, and the loop goes on. You get it. You understand what I'm trying to say here. Basically, it is a regular market that has unusually high levels of speculation and interest in it. Crazy stuff. But once you get that definition out of the way, once you get that little explanation out of the way, it's time to actually sit back and examine card games as a whole and wonder, are TCGs in a bubble? Possibly. Hard to say for sure. I don't really have a way to answer that question. You see, there's a lot of different ways to dictate the actual value of something. And with how many items there are in the TCG market, how many different games there are, and different products per game, I don't really have a way to dictate the actual value of every single item out there, or every single TCG and all of its various products. I do think that some card games have wildly exceeded the price tag that regular demand would ask of them. And obviously, you know, it's no surprise I'm talking about Pokemon and One Piece here. Those are the two speculative hot items. Pokemon saw all of 2025 basically in a fervor. And the low amount of availability leads to things like fights in Costco parking lots, entire Target to Walmarts being bought out, and online queues being absolute hell to get through as the Pokemon Center tries to satisfy some of the massive demand. This in turn has led to absolutely absurd secondary market prices for a lot of the physical products, the sealed products, and the singles. And we're seeing a lot of the same things happen right now in the world of One Piece, where people are doing everything they can to get a hold of the product and a hold of the shinier speculative singles, including all kinds of cards that you might think wouldn't really be worth what people are asking, but hey, they're selling for those prices. I'm not really a smart person. I'm not a financial analyst. I'm hardly a historian. What's the words? What, armchair historian? The guys who like casually know about like one topic and hyper obsess over it. Like, I'm aware of what speculative bubbles are, and I'm aware of Tulip Mania. I'm not going to go into a rant, I promise. I'm not going to ramble about tulips and how you could bankrupt yourself and lose your house over a fucking flower. Oh no, it's starting. But I do believe that if we sit back and look at Pokemon rationally, yes, there is definitely some aspects that would lead you to think that it is in a bubble. Pokemon and One Piece. Yeah, absolutely. Am I willing to put my reputation on the line and say they are definitively in a bubble? Yeah, why not? I think Pokemon will eventually cool down. I think prices will cool down. I think One Piece will inevitably cool down because Bandai Namco is interesting when it comes to how they curate their card games. As for this was a two-part question, actually. I suppose I should have put more emphasis on that. This was a two-part question. Are TCGs in a bubble? To answer that part of the question, some of them are. I don't think all TCGs, I don't think the trading card game market in general is in a bubble because we have examples all the time of card games failing or just losing value. Look at Star Wars, look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Look at what died. There was a card game that died not too long ago, back in like September or October. Wixos? I think it was Wixos. I think Wixos is dead. Shame too, because it had some great art. If every TCG in the ecosystem right now was in a bubble, we wouldn't have things like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Star Wars, and Wixos losing prices and failing. That would not happen. It is happening, so I can say with some certainty that not every card game is in a bubble. But then there's things like Pokemon and One Piece, which, in my opinion, obviously are, and I think a lot of people out there share that opinion as well. I could be wrong. This could just be the new normal for Pokemon and One Piece, and they are going to stay at inflated prices and demand forever. I don't think so, and I'm not holding my breath over that. To answer the second part of this question, though, is what would it popping mean for consumers? What would if Pokemon and One Piece speculation suddenly dried up and evaporated? The number one thing that would happen is a lot of the anger and a lot of the resentment about Pokemon would suddenly vanish, and instead of hearing people complain that stores are selling Pokemon product for too much and it should be selling at MSRP, you'll instead people hearing, this store has the audacity to sell Pokemon at MSRP when I can get it on TCG Player for $85. That was my closest smug voice. Very loud car, I hear you. Very slow car. This has happened before, and it's going to happen again, where during times of market bullishness and fervor and the bubble, you'll hear people absolutely frothing mad over the audacity of these stores and speculators and investors and scalpers selling product for its market value. And they should be selling it at MSRP. And then during the market cooldowns, during the bear market cycle, during the bubble popping, when things are cooling off and everything's going to MSRP or below it, you'll hear those same people either being completely silent or being absolutely upset that stores would want to suddenly respect MSRP and try to keep a hold of some of their value for the future. But actually, I don't think the biggest changes in the consumer. The average consumer is not going to be all that affected by a bubble popping in the TCG. The biggest thing that they'll notice is that they can actually get a hold of sealed product, and that a lot of singles are suddenly a lot cheaper than they were 3 weeks ago. In fact, I don't think the bubble largely affects regular players of the various card games. Pokemon is still a very accessible game. You can still build a deck for very cheap. I confess, I have not looked at the prices of the average One Piece deck, so I won't speculate there, but surely it can't be that bad. Maybe it is, and I'm wrong and crazy, but I know for a fact that at least Pokemon is still, even in this speculative bubble, still very affordable for the people who actually want to play the game. So I don't think the average consumer is going to be affected all that much by a bubble popping for Pokemon, at least. Again, we're going to leave One Piece for another video, where I get to actually look at deck prices. I should have done that before I started this video, but it is what it is. Now, in a bubble popping, the consumer, like I said, they can actually get a hold of boxes. Decks will be as easy to build as they were before. And then they'll go on and complain about stores selling at MSRP. The actual effect, I think, for a bubble popping is on the speculators and the scalpers, the evil scalpers. I mentioned this in a previous video where market turbulence, spikes upwards and downwards, I think they're good because it keeps people on their toes and it keeps you wondering what's next. Well, I think for that same reason, bubbles popping in a collectible asset, like a card game, are maybe not great, but they are good for moving money around. You see, as bubbles pop, the shakier individuals, the people who aren't really willing to sit out the long term, they're going to move on to what they think is the next hot item. You know, as Pokemon collapses to zero, like we're seeing, all the Pokemon product is going to absolutely nothing, right? Right? All the people who were hyper into Pokemon for all of 2025, a lot of them are moving suddenly into One Piece because that's the hot new item. They have perceived the Pokemon bubble as popping, so now One Piece is where all their money is going to go. Well, what happens when the gravy train runs out for One Piece? What happens when that easy cash dollar stops flowing? Well, they're going to move on to the next top thing, whatever that ends up being. I hope it's Yu-Gi-Oh! I do. I genuinely do. Maybe it's Star Wars Unlimited. I hope it's Star Wars Unlimited. You know, I hope that game doesn't die. Despite what a lot of Star Wars Unlimited fans think of me, I don't actually want that game to die. Surprise, I know. I'm very pessimistic about it, but I don't want it dead. So I hope that they get hit with the next speculator wave. But yeah, the people who are going to be most affected by this are the good port friends, the good port investors, the guys who are there because it's the hot item that's guaranteed to go up and they can make easy profit every day. And then they'll leave to something else, selling off all of their collection. Another loud car, very loud night tonight. While jumping ship to the next item. And this happens a lot. You know, people will spend lots of loud cars today. Hang on, this is like a truck. Anyway, where was I? I lost my train of thought. Yeah. So people will do this all the time. They'll spend $10,000 on some asset and then sell out of it in order to jump on the next bandwagon. And then when that bandwagon goes, they'll sell everything they're holding on to for that one and jump on to the next bandwagon and so on and so forth. Those are the people most affected by a bubble popping because they're the ones who are most invested in the bubble at its height. So they have a lot to lose as they jump ship, and they are in a rat race to try and sell everything they've got for the current popping bubble to make it into the next one. A good example is sneaker fanatics. You know, I'm in a small town, okay? I live in a small town, and I was very surprised about 2 or 3 years ago, I think, maybe even like a year and a half ago, there was a sneaker shop that popped up in my town. And I went in once because I needed new work shoes. And I thought it was just a shoe shop. I thought it was like a regular old place you can get any shoes. But no, it was this crazy place where there was a bunch of ludicrously high price tags on sneakers. And I asked the guy if he just had any work shoes. He's like, no, that's not what this kind of place is. I was like, okay, have a good day. I went online a few days later because I was reminded of it. And I found out that, yeah, it turns out there's people out there who will spend absurd prices on shoes. That blew my mind. Live and let live, you know. But yeah, that took me off guard, and I was like, okay, whatever, kind of crazy. And then I found out that this was kind of a recent thing, kind of a its own kind of frenzy. But I won't get into that because, again, I'm not super informed. But, you know, come this year, that same store is gone. They don't exist anymore. From what I understand, they were having a bunch of financial trouble throughout the summer of 2025 as their regular customers went over to Pokemon, because that's what happened. The people who were buying sneakers for $100+ a pair of shoes, still can't believe that, they were suddenly all in on Pokemon. And now those same people are all in on One Piece. These are the same people who, when Digimon was hot and fresh and you couldn't get a box of Digimon release special booster for anything resembling a reasonable price, these guys were buying it up. They were spending $300 at one point on Digimon product. And then when Digimon went by the wayside. They hopped on to One Piece, and then they hopped out of One Piece almost right away. There was a few things they jumped around, but I won't talk about that anymore. Anyway, I'm rambling again. I caught myself rambling. So basically, to answer the questions, are TCGs in the bubble? Some of them are. Would it popping be bad for the consumer? Not really. Not really. But that's all I got. Please like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you agree with me, disagree with me, think I'm crazy, or whatever have you. It appeals to the algorithm, and the algorithm is happy, makes me happy. Check out the Discord, check out the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.